What's up, guys? Had the win last night on the Houston Rockets. That line actually tanked down to 4.5 later in the day. It was announced that Gilgeous-Alexander was not going to be playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder, which I think did have some effect. But, I mean, we'll take it if we're on the right side. Get some closing line value there, beat the closing number by quite a bit. Didn't expect that to be the case, but I just expected the Rockets to show up and put in a full effort with the fact that they're trying to fight to get into the playoffs, into the play-in games at this point, and that is what they did. They put in a full effort. They had a nice lead early. They did blow the lead, and at one point, I think they were down by more than 7 later in the game. Were able to come back, send it into overtime, and actually win in overtime. Huge win for the Houston Rockets. We'll take it. Winning day, not bad. Move on to today. Of course, today the Sweet 16 starts. I am going to be at the East Regional games, which are going way too late into the night. As I said, UConn really kind of lucking out with the way the scheduling worked out. Maybe the whoever does the scheduling, the committee or whatever, maybe they intentionally did this to help UConn even more. I don't know. Of course, we knew UConn was going to be in the East Regional, getting to play in Boston, close to home, but they also get the earlier of the two games, which I think is going to be a huge advantage when they have to turn around and play again on Saturday. I think UConn's going to easily win tonight, probably against San Diego State. Unfortunately, even though it is a finals rematch from last year, I'm not getting involved in either of these games, by the way, or any of the 4 games that are being played today, because the West Regionals, I believe, are also being played today or tonight, off by about a half hour. And of course, the East, where I'm going to be, get the slightly later of the two, because that totally makes sense, right? Why would you make the later ones be the ones on the Pacific Coast where they're all 3 hours earlier? Why wouldn't you make those ones the later? Or why would you make the West ones that are slightly later? Although actually basically 3 hours earlier. Why would you make the those ones be the slightly later ones? That would make too much sense, wouldn't it? You guys get what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. If you make the East Coast have the latest game, it's going to end 12:30 a.m. Whereas at least if you made that one be the latest, if you made the latest game be in the West instead, at least it would only end like 9:30 p.m. their time or whatever. So that would make way more sense. It would make sense for us in the East to get the ones that are a half hour earlier, but whatever. Obviously, that makes too much sense to do it that way. UConn is going to have the advantage on Saturday because they get to play the earlier of the two games and probably the much easier third double-digit favorite. San Diego State, not as good as last year's iteration, and last year's iteration, of course, did overperform in the tournament as well. So don't really expect much out of San Diego State, unfortunately, although I would be thrilled if they actually were able to pull it off, but it's not going to happen. And then Iowa State, Illinois, going to be a very interesting game where KenPom now has Illinois ranked number 1 in offensive efficiency and Iowa State number 1 in defensive efficiency. And Iowa State not as good offensively, and Illinois even worse defensively, and Illinois the faster tempo team. So that is a real big clash of paces in that game. So I think it's going to be interesting. I lean to Illinois in that one. I just don't think Iowa State has the ability to score enough to really do it, even though I do usually tend to like defense. In that particular matchup, I kind of don't, but I'm not going to be playing those games. And then in the West, you got Arizona, who are my champion pick in my bracket. Hopefully they're able to get through. They're at least staying like out West in familiar territory for them. And they get Clemson having to come in. I don't know where Clemson played the earlier games, but Clemson, of course, is an East Coast team, so we'll see how that affects them at all. But Clemson is the better defense, getting points. So, well, maybe not I don't know if they're the better defense, actually. They are definitely the more defensive team. Arizona, very good on both offense and defense, though, but Arizona, a much faster paced team. So it's going to come down to whether or not Clemson can play defense and slow the game down. And the fact that they're getting a bunch of points, I still don't have a good read on that one, though, so I don't really want to get involved in that one. And then Alabama, North Carolina will be, I believe, a faster paced game. I think both of those teams like to run. We'll see what happens there. We'll see if Alabama finally falters with that very suspect defense, to say the least. They have by far the worst defense left in the tournament. I don't know if they're going to be able to get past North Carolina with a defense that's that bad. Michigan State, actually, probably the better team than Alabama, just because they in a better matchup against North Carolina. Michigan State just wasn't able to do it. Unfortunately for my bracket, Michigan State had the big lead early, and they are a slower paced, more defense oriented team like a better team to match up against North Carolina than a fast all offense Alabama team that I just don't think is going to be balanced enough to get the job done most likely, but we will see what happens there. I'm not playing either of those. I'm not playing in the NBA either. NBA, we only have 2 games. My Boston Celtics are playing on the road in a little bit of revenge, and they are just a monstrous favorite. Maybe the Hawks are like resting some players in this scenario. I don't know. I don't even remember what the Hawks play-in scenario looks like now, if they're like almost definitively in the play-in now. I'm not even sure, but Celtics did just lose to the Hawks in the previous game as like a 10.5 point favorite, and now they're 17.5 point favorite. Not sure what the difference in line is. I don't know what there's got to be some personnel change here, but of course the Hawks have been without Trae Young for a long time, so that isn't the change. Don't know what the deal is in that one. And then you got Bucks Pelicans, a much bigger game, I guess, because both of those teams are quite good. Bucks Pelicans, I believe, are coming off a loss, right, against Oklahoma City in a return home. So I think the Pelicans are in a bit of a better spot there, because usually when you return home and you don't play like the best game, you tend to be in a better spot in the next game. But they are facing a gauntlet here of Oklahoma City, Milwaukee, Celtics, and Phoenix. And then even Orlando's pretty good, all in a row in this long homestand. Homestand, yes, but they're playing a lot of tough opponents here. So we'll see how that winds up going. The Bucks are actually the road favorite in that one, up to a 2-point favorite. I don't know what the reasoning is for that, really, because New Orleans is certainly not a bad team, and I would kind of lean that way just because to New Orleans, just because I think they're kind of in a bounce back spot there, whereas Milwaukee, they're coming off that crazy double overtime game, although they did blow a gigantic lead in that game. The Lakers were able to come back and win that game in ridiculous fashion, so we'll see if what Milwaukee has left. But Milwaukee is starting a road trip here, so it's not exactly the worst spot for Milwaukee either necessarily. But coming off that double overtime game, it is possible they run out of steam a little bit, although the Lakers did not run out of steam last night. I'm lucky I did not play on the Lakers or the Portland Trail, or on the Memphis Grizzlies, or on the Portland Trailblazers last night. I mentioned fading the Lakers and fading the Atlanta Hawks. Was it the Atlanta Hawks last night? I forget who it even was, but I mentioned fading those two teams being in bad spots, and it did not work out for those potential plays, those leans there. But at least the only game I actually played was actually the strongest. Hey, I was able to weigh the strength of those correctly last night, with the playoff scenarios becoming a factor as well. Houston Rockets with the win. There you go. But I'm not going to be on anything in the NBA. We'll move to the NHL. We got a big NHL card, and I'm on 2 NHL games. NHL, first game that I'm going to be on, I won't even bother talking about all these other games here. There are just too many games to break them all down. But I'm going to fade the New York Rangers. Colorado Avalanche are going to be the play, but they're up from -144 to -155. So it does look like they are attracting some money here, because the line has moved up on them. I wish could have gotten a bit of the better number there. I think you can get about -150. Let me see. On Colorado right now, which isn't too bad. It's not up that far from the -145. -154 looks like it's the best right now. So yeah, it's not great, but I think it's worth the price here, even though they are playing a good New York Rangers team. Look at what the Rangers are coming off of, man. The Rangers, they just clinched a playoff spot. I believe they're the first team in the NHL. They're definitely the first team in the Eastern Conference, at the very least, to clinch a playoff spot. That's a big scenario, man, for the New York Rangers. I mean, of course, they were in the playoffs last year too, but they are now in the 1 spot. They're 1 point ahead of the Boston Bruins. They could be in a bad spot here, even though they are starting a 2-game road trip here. Look at what they're coming off of, man. Their last 3 games were huge conference games. They won at Boston, huge win, 5-2. Then they beat Florida, coming back home 4-3 in a shootout. So those are the top 2 teams in the East besides them, basically. The 3 of them are the top 3 teams in the East, and they beat those 2. Then they faced Philadelphia yesterday, and that game went into overtime, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, Tuesday, and they beat Philadelphia in overtime. Another huge win for the New York Rangers. Monster win. So they're coming off 3 monster wins in a row, and yeah, Colorado's a good team, but what are the Rangers going to have left, man? And do they really need this game? Not really. They're coming off that stretch of huge wins, all against conference foes, clinching a playoff spot, just absolutely huge. It's, I believe, highly likely at this point that they're going to be the 1 seed in the Metro division in the playoffs, which is really all they need. They're only 3 points ahead of Carolina, though, but still, that's a decent amount of padding there. By the way, I don't really like the spot that Philadelphia is in either today, coming off that game, and they are facing a Canadian team that just beat the Colorado Avalanche, though. So weird that both of these teams in this game are their previous opponents are both facing each other. So that's kind of weird. So I don't like the fact that Montreal's. So I'm mentioning that game quickly. I don't like that Montreal's coming off a win over the Avalanche, although I still think Philadelphia is in a worse spot in that one against Montreal, just because Philadelphia did just lose that tough game to the New York Rangers. And Philadelphia, they do have huge, or no, actually they don't have a huge amount of padding. What am I saying? Philadelphia, what are they? They're in the 3 spot in the wild card right now. Or no, they're not in the wild card. They're in the 3 spot in the playoffs. I mean, but their lead over, their lead isn't that big over the Washington Capitals. It's only a 1-point lead. So Philadelphia probably does, if they want to avoid the wild card, they probably do still have to show up and continue playing. So that one's harder to handicap, Philadelphia and Montreal. I will play play against the Rangers here. The Rangers coming off those big wins. They don't really have that much left to prove. They have a little bit of cushion right now over Carolina with a 3-point cushion, sitting in the 1 seed right now, having clinched a playoff spot and maybe celebrated a bit too much and done it against a division foe. That's big, man. That is pretty big. Maybe they celebrated a little bit. Now they have to go out into elevation. Usually to start a road trip, you're going to be focused, but in a spot like this, I'm not quite sure that that's going to be the case. But what you are going to get is a Colorado Avalanche team who are a good team, and they're probably going to be focused. They just had a win streak snapped, and usually I don't like to go on teams that just had a win streak snapped because a lot of times that tends to hang them over into the next game. That was on Tuesday, but that was just a bad performance, man, against a bad Montreal team. Colorado had a nice string of wins before that. They'd won a bunch of games in a row leading into that, like 9 wins in a row or something, and lost the win streak. I think this is a bounce back spot, though. They're not going to be unfocused with the East Conference New York Rangers coming into their house. I don't see them being unfocused and coming off an ugly loss to a bad team at home, too, where Colorado was a minus 500 money line favorite in that game and lost. I don't think they're going to be very thrilled about that, very happy about that. I think the Avalanche are in a big bounce back spot here after that embarrassing performance. Losing to Montreal is one of the biggest favorites that you'll see on the entire year in the NHL. No excuse for really losing that game. I think they're going to bounce back and show up here in Colorado. They are also, of course, in a fight for playoff seeding here, so that will motivate them maybe potentially a little bit. They are not really in danger of dropping out of the playoffs or dropping into the wild card. I mean, they're not really in danger of that, but they are still battling for this 1 seed in the West or in the Central, I guess, division of the West, only 2 points behind Dallas, and they're only 3 points ahead of Winnipeg. So definitely a cluster there in their division between the top 3 teams. So Colorado, they're a good team in a bounce back spot. When you have a good team that's in a spot like that where you think they're going to show up and be focused, that is usually a good scenario to play on them, even though they are playing a good team in the Rangers. I think it's a worse spot for the Rangers and a spot where the Rangers might not have as much incentive to completely show up there. So we'll do that. And in the other one, and it does look like in that one, by the way, the Rangers do have 57% of the tickets, but 59% of the cash. So I don't like that. It looks like they have the cash discrepancy there, but we can kind of ignore that. It does look like they are slightly public, at least. Maybe the public coming in and saying, oh, it's 2 good teams, and Colorado just lost to Montreal. So we want to take the plus money with the New York Rangers if they're getting involved in that. That might be their sentiment. Obviously, I look to go the other way on that one. Colorado minus 154 will be the play. And then the other one is going to be fading the Nashville Predators, who are also probably going to be public, although I don't see the percentages yet. They're up from minus 160 to minus 164 on this one. You can get Arizona at plus 145 right now. And yes, this involves playing on a bad, eliminated Arizona Coyotes team. They were eliminated from the playoffs, but look at what Nashville's coming off of, man. Kind of like the New York Rangers. They're coming off of a nice string of wins. They've been playing really good hockey recently. They've only lost 2 games going all the way back to starting on February 17th with a win over St. Louis. They've lost 2 games in like almost a month and a half. Nashville playing some of their best hockey, but now they're coming off of a win on the road over Florida, then a win over Detroit in a game that I thought was a sandwich spot. I thought it was a bad spot for Nashville, and they still got out of there with a win over a Detroit team that is fighting to get into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. Then they just beat the returning champs Vegas in overtime on Tuesday, and now that's what they're coming off of. They had beaten Vegas once this year. They were 1-1, but now they win the season series against the returning champs in Vegas. They're able to take both home games, I believe, and beat them 2-1 on the season. Is that right? I don't even know. It doesn't matter that much, but they were able to beat them 2 out of 3 games on the season. Actually, no, both of the other games are on the road, and they actually split the road games. And up next, after Arizona, they have Colorado, Boston, St. Louis. Those are all bigger games. Colorado, Boston, both really good teams. And then St. Louis, a team that is fighting for a wild card spot as well. Nashville, they're they got to be pretty certain they're going to be in the playoffs now at this point. Nashville here, they're looking pretty good now after playing such good hockey recently. It looked like they might not make the playoffs, but now they're sitting atop the wild card. And maybe you could argue that maybe they're fighting to even get one of the better seedings here in the Western Conference, but their division is the same one as the Colorado division. So like I said, they're in a division where the top 3 teams have a lot of points. So they are 4 games out of that, 4 games off of Winnipeg. It is possible, but they're sitting pretty right now in the wild card, man, with St. Louis being the first team out of the wild card, 10 points behind them. Nashville is almost guaranteed a playoff spot now with how they've been playing. With that win over Vegas, who is some of their competition for a wild card spot, they knocked Vegas to 4 points behind them. That's a big, big win for Nashville. And with Colorado up next, this has got to be a sandwich, man. I don't expect Nashville to really have full focus on this Arizona team that just got eliminated, I don't know how long ago, from the playoffs. This is a sandwich spot. It's a spot where I don't think Nashville has that much incentive to totally show up. They're laying a price on the road. Not a very good spot for them to be in there. We're going to take Arizona plus money there. Arizona plus 145 or whatever it is. And Arizona, the thing about them is the record isn't really that bad, and at least they're still playing competitive hockey. They've won 2 of their last 3, and they've won 4 of their last 6 games. So they've still been playing. They have been putting in effort still, so I like that. And they won 6-2 in the previous game against a really bad Columbus team, which I think is just going to be like a momentum restarter there after they lost to Dallas the game before that. Can't really blame them for losing to Dallas. Those 2 wins, the last 2 losses in that time. So they've won 4 of their last 6. The 2 losses in that span were both to Dallas. So you can't really even blame them for that. So they haven't been playing that poorly, really. So an Arizona team that looks like they're still showing up and playing these games, I like it. And they got a team that's going to be a playoff team now coming into their house in a pretty questionable motivation spot. Arizona plus the money there. Then we're going to MLB. I got my Red Sox hat on. It is Major League Baseball opening day, baby. And I'm going to have 2 plays in the MLB already. We're jumping right into the fire. Let's start it right out, man. We're going to be on the interleague game and fading the returning champion Texas Rangers, man, expecting a little bit of a World Series hangover. A lot of times you can see the team that lost the World Series have a hangover, but that's the Diamondbacks. I don't really want to get involved in that one. The Diamondbacks are a big favorite in their game. Who are they playing against? The Colorado Rockies at home, even though Arizona, I think, is too public as well. And it looks like there is some line movement going against them. That's Kyle Freeland for Colorado against Zach Gallen for Arizona. Don't really want to get involved in that one, but I would not want to play on the Arizona Diamondbacks coming off the World Series loss. Usually playing against the World Series loser is actually a better spot than playing against the winner, but I'm going to play against the winner here because I think they're overvalued. Texas is actually down from -120 to -114. They were not the best team in baseball last year, and both teams in the World Series last year were not the best teams in their respective leagues last year, but they both got there. Congratulations to the Rangers. They won the World Series, but now I think they're going to be in an overvalued spot here, and I think that the pitching matchup is against them in this one. So they've gone down on the money line. You actually, playing the Chicago Cubs here, you can actually only get them at plus 100 at this point now because the line has moved down to the point where it's almost flipping the favorite at this point, to the point where the Cubs might actually wind up going off a favorite. It might not get quite that far, but I do think that they have the advantage here, both like just value-wise, I think they do, but I think they actually have the advantage in this game anyway, especially with the starting pitching matchup. Texas does have 55% of the tickets, but 57% of the cash. So I don't like that it looks like they have the cash discrepancy, but they are going to be the public team and probably too public. But looking at the pitching matchup, you got to look at the starting pitching matchup, especially on opening day where these pitchers are probably going to be ready to go. You got to look at the pitching matchups. And what we have is Nathan Eovaldi is, unfortunately for Texas, he's their ace, even though he had he definitely had a good season last year, but he's an old man. He's in his mid-30s. He had a really good season last year, but that was one of his best seasons of his career. And usually that late in your career, you usually don't see somebody turn around that much, especially a guy who on his entire career has an ERA of above 4 and a really ugly 1.3 whip and a strikeout walk ratio that's actually not really that good either. Although his strikeout walk ratio was actually really bad last year too, at 2.8, which is close to where his career strikeout walk ratio is. His strikeout walk ratio was way better with the Red Sox. For some reason, it was way, way high with the Red Sox, and I don't really know why, but last year it was awful. And usually having a bad strikeout walk ratio is not an indicator of a dominant ace pitcher here. And this is the guy that they're throwing out there on opening day. His metrics last year were, I think, his ERA and stuff, I think his stats looked a little bit too good last year. And now Eovaldi's coming in. He's facing the Chicago Cubs. I think he's a little bit of an overrated pitcher. He's a bit old at this point. I think he overperformed last year, but the Cubs are 12 for 42 off in lifetime. The guys that the Cubs have in their starting lineup, they do have Bellinger now, so they're stacking their lineup a little bit. Yan Gomes has been really good against Nathan Eovaldi. If I'm looking at this right, if these guys are still actually all indeed on the Cubs hitters are 12 for 42. That's a 286 batting average lifetime against Nathan Eovaldi. So that's pretty good. So he historically has not been very good against these particular hitters. These hitters do pretty well against him. Whereas you got the younger, better pitcher in Justin Steele going for Chicago. He proved that he's their ace last year, man. Justin Steele, he's a younger guy, and he had a really good season last year. Better than Nathan Eovaldi's. His strikeout walk ratio was way up last year. And that, I think, is actually indicative that he's improving, because that was only his third season ever in the MLB, and it was his most full season. It was the season where he pitched the most. So I think he's actually rising a little bit and coming into his own, whereas I think Eovaldi's on the back end of his career. I think Steele is entering his prime. So I like Steele in this matchup. I prefer Steele very much in this one. And against the Texas Rangers hitters, even though the Rangers actually have good hitters, they're known for having good offense and not good pitching, really. Their hitters have not done well against Justin Steele. They're not that used to seeing him because it's interleague. At least Eovaldi has kind of been in both leagues, although he's been in the AL for a while now. So both of these pitchers are a little bit unfamiliar to their opponents, but Justin Steele, 226 opponent batting average against these Texas Rangers hitters, only 7 for 31 against them. So I think he's the better pitcher. He's the younger pitcher. He's at a better point in his career. I like playing a Justin Steele here in this one. And you got the World Series hangover effect potentially in play for the Texas Rangers. I'm going to be on Justin Steele and the Chicago Cubs there in that one. And Steele, of course, like I said, has the better numbers against the opposing hitters, even though Texas might have the better hitting lineup, although the Cubs have kind of stacked their lineup a little bit. So I like the Cubs. And then the other one I'm going to be on is going to be to play the home underdog Oakland A's at plus 136. You can grab them in a nice underdog money line here. This one, it does look like there is a little bit of a cash discrepancy. Or no, actually the cash discrepancy, is definitely on the A's here, with 78% of the tickets on Cleveland, on the Cleveland Indians. I refuse to call them the Guardians, and 53% of the cash on Cleveland. I prefer Oakland in this one. It looks like the market, you got the public on Cleveland. The cash discrepancy is very strongly against Cleveland, it looks like, with a lot less of the cash than the tickets on Cleveland. Of course, the public's not coming in and saying, give me the Oakland A's here, please. One of the worst teams in baseball. But the Guardians, the Indians, are also down from minus 157 to minus 153. So there is a little bit of reverse line movement, it looks like, going against where the public is as well. And that means that maybe some of the bigger bets are coming in and playing Oakland here. I like Oakland. We don't even know how much longer Oakland's going to be in this city, but I like this. This is Shane Bieber against Alex Wood. And one thing I like about this, Alex Wood, he's one of the only pitchers in this scenario today where he is making his debut with a new team. And I think that usually tends to be a motivator. So even though his stats last year sucked, Alex Wood is not very good, man. He was much better earlier in his career, so that does worry me. His whip was really bad last year. His whip was indicative that his numbers should have been even worse than they were. His strikeout walk ratio, I don't think, was any good last year either. Really, it was very, very low, 1.8, but that was an extreme low. Like in his career, it's at 3.2, so maybe you expect a little bit of a bounce back there. Like, I think last year his strikeout walk ratio at least was a lot worse than it should have been. His whip was actually, that was the worst that it's been. He's still only 33, so he's not quite like on the back end of his career yet, even though I just made fun of Eovaldi, who's not that much older than Alex Wood is. But Alex Wood, I think he's still got some left, and that was like a career high whip last year, although it does make his ERA look better than it actually should have been last year. He did not have a good season last year, probably his worst season statistically ever. But I think that means he might not regress, but maybe like kind of bounce back a little bit this season. And he's making his debut for a new team, which I think is a motivating factor a little bit there. You want to play well when you're like a veteran like this and you come out for a new team. You tend to want to play well for that new team in your debut performance with them. So I think that's going to be a little bit of a motivator for Alex Wood there. And it might mean that the opponents that he's facing might not quite be used to facing him because he's pitched in the NL most of the time. Cleveland's hitters are only 6 for 32 off of Alex Wood lifetime. That's a 188 batting average. So these Cleveland hitters have been shut down by Alex Wood, man. That he has good numbers against these Cleveland hitters, or they have struggled against him, really. So I like that. I think that gives him kind of a hidden advantage where he's on a team that everybody knows isn't good. His stats don't look good, but you look at his specific stats against these particular hitters. I think that matters in baseball, man, because that tends to be like, oh, there could be like a matchup thing there with this particular hitter versus this particular pitcher. Like they just don't match up well against this particular pitcher for whatever reason. And when it's like a decent size sample size like that, I think you can glean something from it. Shane Bieber, I mean, he had a pretty decent year last year. Yeah, his whip was a little bit higher than you'd like to see. I think his ERA, based on that whip, his ERA probably should have been a little bit higher. Woods was certainly worse. Bieber was certainly the better of these two pitchers last year. But in this matchup, I like that Wood is going to have a little bit of an extra motivational factor there playing for a new team. But then you got Shane Bieber. Oakland's hitters have only had 25 at-bats against him, sure, but they are 8 for 25 off him, a 320 opponent batting average. That's not very good, man. So Bieber has struggled. These Oakland hitters somehow have been able to hit this guy. They've been able to hit Bieber. So I think that's a built-in matchup edge here for Oakland, where their starting pitcher versus the opposing hitters actually has way better numbers than Cleveland's starting pitcher against Oakland's hitters do here. So I think that's a big edge here and kind of a hidden edge here. And that's going to do it, man. Those are the plays in baseball. And, of course, once you get into the baseball season, you got to start looking at the state that the bullpens are in and whatever. But, of course, on opening day, the bullpens are basically ready to go. These teams all have their full bullpens. So, actually, that might mean the starting pitching matchup might mean a little bit less, but it does mean that the bullpens are kind of just an even slate. So, a lot of times when I'm focused on the starting pitching matchup and I really want to exclude the bullpens, like if the team that has the better starting pitching significantly in the matchup, like has their bullpen in a worse state, that's when you want to go in and play like a first 5 inning bet. I could see playing these on the first 5 innings as well, but I'm just going to go full game on these. I think full game is the way to go on these ones. So even though I said I do like to do some different things in baseball with first 5 inning bets and totals and stuff like that, in this one, I look at it a little bit differently, and we will go and take just the full games here. So those 4 plays for me today, man. 4 plays, 2 in hockey, 2 in Major League Baseball. So even though the sports that people are paying attention to are March Madness and the NBA, probably we're just going into the other sports where people aren't paying as much attention. We got all evening games and night games tonight. In MLB, Chicago Cubs plus 100, Oakland A's plus 136. Couple of underdogs there. And then in hockey, Colorado Avs, Avalanche minus 154, having to lay a bit of a price there. And the Arizona Coyotes plus 145. Let's have a good one, man. Let's enjoy everything. Hopefully I have fun at the games tonight as well. Going to be at the East Regionals and March Madness, man. That late game looks like it might be quite an interesting one and a fun game to watch. Peace.